So Bundesliga Matchday 4 is here, or it's gone now, and it's time to now look back at it. What I will say to start this is I think from the opening 4 match days of the Bundesliga, if we ignore the team at the very top, it's proved to be quite a fun and interesting opening few games. We'll first start with Stuttgart against St. Pauli, which Stuttgart won 2-0. It was clear a shake-up was needed at Stuttgart, maybe especially in midfield, and Sebastian Hoeneß did it, and did the bold thing of dropping captain Atakan Karazor for midfielder Chema Andreas. And it paid off because Stuttgart won, and they actually looked a lot better. If you listen to what I say sometimes, I've been a big champion of dropping Karazor, because when you have a midfielder like Stiller next to him, you need someone good enough to match his quality. And maybe it potentially looks like in Andres, they maybe have that. And so the pair in their first game starting together played well and were able to really withhold what is a promising midfield duo at St. Pauli in Joel Fujita and James Sands, who were also good in this game. The only downside for Stiller is that he took objectively one of the worst penalties ever in the first half. So the goal scorers for Stuttgart were Ermedin Demirovic and Bilal El-Khanous, with his first goal for Stuttgart. But Demirovic is now, he flew under the radar last season. He had a good season from a goal scoring perspective, but he kind of flew under the radar because most of his time was coming off the bench and he was behind Nick Woltemade. So I think it's fair to say that Demirovic is potentially underrated, and you're starting to see that in the opening weeks of the season as well. I mean, he scored like an impressive back heel last weekend against Freiburg, and then this weekend he scored like a mazy dribble inside the box to open the scoring, and he even scored a header which was disallowed right at the beginning of the game as well. So I think Demirovic is clearly good enough to be Stuttgart's main striker, but I think if you look at like his profile compared to like what Woltemade is and what Undav is, you kind of need to make up for the creativity or the lack of creativity with him, with the players around him. And with like El-Khanous scoring his first goal, that's obviously the step in the right direction. Because Demirovic is clearly improved since he moved from Augsburg. It's just getting the best out of him each time. Obviously, for Stuttgart now, it's where their season kickstarts because they also have a midweek game in the Europa League. And so now it will be testing how good can this squad do? Can they deal with playing 2 games a week? Or can they deal with the Thursday to Sunday schedule, which is quite brutal? Or for St. Pauli, I'm not going to say they were expected to lose because Stuttgart's form, but this was a really are they actually contenders, or have they just shown that yes, they can not be fighting relegation? And I think in the opening games they've kind of shown the latter, which obviously is good enough for them. On Saturday we'll start with Bayern Munich against Hoffenheim. Bayern won this 4-1. Leonard Karl has been quite impressive and he started this game as well, so it's now just whether he can continue getting game time and slowly become a part of the team, similar to how Jamal Musiala is. So Harry Kane did score his first hat-trick, or his second hat-trick of the season, with 2 penalties. One of them was a horrible handball call when Hajdari kind of moved to block a shot and his arm was in a natural position when you're trying to block, and it hit his arm and it was given. But what I have noticed in the opening weeks of the season is Kane is a lot better without Jamal Musiala. Kane obviously is not like a traditional striker. He likes to drop deep and receive the ball. Without Musiala there, he's able to do that, because then on the flip side, you have more dynamic players who will run and drive and be on the end of Kane's passes, like Luis Diaz or Serge Gnabry. And so that has allowed Kane to be a more well-rounded player in the absence of Musiala. So who knew? They didn't even need Woltemade or Wirtz. They just needed allow Kane to play further back. And the harmony of the front 4 in the opening games of the season is very good. However, I will say this, and I'll die on this hill, and it may potentially be unpopular. So far, Harry Kane has 7 goals in 4 games this season, and that would statistically put him on course of breaking Gerd Muller's record, Robert Lewandowski's record, should I say. But I understand that penalties, like, you have to score them. This is the key. But it's the fact that Kane, like you saw it last season as well, there can be periods in the game where Kane will just disappear. And by the end of it, he'll end with 2 goals, but 2 of them are penalties. So I think if Kane does come close to Lewandowski's record, it's not going to be the same. And I will say, the game has gone if Kane breaks the record with the amount of penalties he scores. Because you look at the amount of penalties that Lewandowski scored in that season and the amount of penalties that Gerd Muller scored in that season as well, it's so minimal. Like, they're only taking 3-4 penalties in the season, while Kane has already taken 3 already, and we're 4 games into the season. So if Kane does this season potentially break the record, granted he would have broken the record, but I would say it's not as impressive as Lewandowski's, and also not as impressive as Muller's. I'm also of the opinion, but I think that this one's a lot more clear, that Kane he won't be remembered obviously in the same light that Muller and Lewandowski will all have been, for obvious reasons, because of the length that he would have stayed in Munich and what he had achieved. The other team that won was Freiburg. They beat Werder Bremen 3-0. Freiburg are clearly picking up steam now. They look a lot better. Noah Atubolu became the first goalkeeper in the Bundesliga to save 5 penalties in a row. It should become increasingly obvious now that Atubolu, who was a key part for Germany under 21s in the summer, should be given his chance in the national team, in the senior national team, either in this upcoming international break in October or in November, because the crop of German goalkeepers now, none of them are really performing at a high level. And so you kind of need someone, or you're going to have like Manuel Neuer sneaking in behind, potentially trying to make a return to the national team. Or for Freiburg, again, a bit like Stuttgart, this is where they play Basel in midweek. Granted, it's not like a treacherous away day because it's closer to Basel than it is to Stuttgart if you're in Freiburg. But it's a testament to how can their squad cope with this. Because those 8 weeks where you're playing Thursday and Sunday can really make or break a season. For Bremen, obviously, they had this impressive win against Borussia Mönchengladbach last week. And I think what this has shown now is that attacking is not a problem for them. I mean, there was periods of the game against Freiburg where they were creating more than Freiburg. Obviously, they didn't score them, but it's the fact that the defending was horrible as well. And I think if you look at the past couple of games, Gladbach were just horrible, were horrible in the attacking front. And so that allowed them to really come away with a clean sheet. Against Leverkusen, if they allowed Leverkusen to score 3, but on the flip side, they were then able to score 3 as well. So the fruits of Horst Steffen football is that they are good going forward, struggle with clinicality, which makes sense when you don't really have a senior striker, where you've got Victor Boniface, but he's still like gaining fitness. But on the defensive end, you're dealing with like this quite young team because most of your senior players are injured. Nicholas Stark, Amos Piper, whatever, and so you're left with Marco Friede playing next to an 18-year-old, and then you've got Felix Agu, who's not really a proper left back at left back, and then you've got Mio Backhaus in goal. So defending is a bit of a problem for Bremen, but I think because this is a young lineup or back line, as soon as they start to like get used to things and learn, then I think they'll come good. So next game is Mainz versus Augsburg. Mainz beat Augsburg 4-1. A bit of a reality check for Augsburg. The honeymoon period under Sandro Wagner is clearly over. They were quite comfortably beaten by Mainz, so he kind of looks back to their best. Mainz had struggled to score from opening play in the early stages of the season, but they were able to do that from Katsuki Sano. So their problems seem to be behind them now because they were scoring quite freely and were quite lethal on the counter as well. But the one focus I want to have, well, there's 2 actually. The first is Augsburg. So since Wagner's came in, they've kind of switched to this Roman Colosseum style of tunnel, like entering, and it's become a bit of a meme because it's quite ridiculous. But then if you look into it and look into like the whole historical aspect of it, it makes sense. So Augsburg as a city was founded by Augustus, who was the founder of the Roman Empire in 15 BC, which means there is a link between ancient Rome and Augsburg. Obviously, the joke is that is Augsburg, they're not exactly Romans. And if you're going off Augsburg's performance in this was akin to Rome's performance in the Battle of Canaan, when they lost to Carthage and Hannibal. Someone who has a bit more of a Roman legacy is Dominic Kor, who is on course to become the dirtiest player in the history of the Bundesliga. Which, it's special, they don't make players like him anymore. Currently it's Stefan Effenberg, who used to play for Bayern Munich and Borussia Mönchengladbach, but it does look like Kor will overtake him, because he's only 31. He's still like a key part of a Bundesliga side, and so there's a real possibility that statistically he will overtake Effenberg this season. I mean, he only needs one more sending off, and then he's been the most sent off player in the history of the Bundesliga. So Kor will have a legacy in the Bundesliga, and it will be a bit of a special one. In the next, Hamburg played Heidenheim. This was a bit of an early relegation 6-pointer, as it suggested that Heidenheim will be relegated this season. So for Hamburg, they kind of needed to win this to give them hope that they will not also be getting relegated. And they delivered. They won their first game, and they scored their first 2 goals as well. If you want narrative, Luka Vuskovic, whose brother Mario was a key part until he got doped up and banned from football until next November, he scored the first goal. So Hamburg's first goal back in the Bundesliga. In the second half, they did score from Brian Philippe. Heidenheim did trying to mount a late revival with a late goal, but Hamburg managed to hold them off, and it shows that Hamburg are clearly getting used to Bundesliga football now. Granted, it was Heidenheim, but a win is a win, especially when you're most likely going to be grinding it out at the bottom of the table. Now it'll give Hamburg some confidence going forward, and now they have a favourable run of games ahead of them, and so that means they can now build on this and potentially use this confidence that they now have to help them win a couple more games. The final game on Saturday in the evening saw Leipzig play Cologne. Leipzig won this 3-1. Johan Bakayoko was kind of the star for Leipzig. He set up the second goal. David Raum played in the corner that led to the first goal for Leipzig and scored from a free kick in the third. But things are clearly coming together for Leipzig under Werner. Obviously, for most teams, they need the players to adapt and get used to one another, especially in attack, and it's slowly coming together now. So maybe you can make the argument that potentially the game against Bayern Munich came too early for Leipzig, but that has also drastically lowered expectations for them going forward. So now they can kind of outplay them. Well, for Cologne, this is their first loss of the season, coming crashing back down to earth following their good start to the season. They still look like a good team under Lukas Krasniok, and Saidem Allah, again, looks like a very exciting player. So I do hope he leaves Cologne. So the first game on Sunday proved to be the shock result of the weekend, with Union Berlin beating Frankfurt 4-3. It was really a classic Union Berlin, as in literally every single one of their goals was scored on the counter. With Oliver Burke scoring a hat-trick, he kind of ran Frankfurt left-back Nathaniel Brown ragged the whole afternoon using his pace. So now it begins to raise questions, Frankfurt were way too open defensively. And so, can they handle these two games a week? Because they were all flooding forward, which kind of played into the hands of Union, as I said, to allow them to counter. They played into Union's hands. Granted, they were able to fight back, but, there is question marks, because we can't forget that this is a young team. They don't have that many elderly players in the squad. It's Ritsu Doan, Mikael Zetterer, Robin Koch, Rasmus Christensen when he's fit, and sometimes Elias Skiri. The rest are all quite young. So I think there's what you can say for their conceding of goals. And if you actually look at it and look at Frankfurt's first couple of games, the warning signs have kind of been there. I mean, against Bremen, they conceded from the counter. In the opening game, they conceded against Hoffenheim. Against Leverkusen, not so much, because 2 of the goals were free kicks. direct free kicks. There's not really a lot you can do from them. And then against Galatasaray as well, the exact same thing happened again. Galatasaray scored from a counter. So that's clearly becoming Frankfurt's weakness. As much as control they have in games, like the fact that they've become too open could be their kryptonite. Someone who doesn't seem to have kryptonite at the moment is Can Özun. He scored twice again. So it's really like, this is Can Özun's season. And I don't think there's any more, because you can constantly keep saying it, because he constantly keeps performing. It's like the same with Omar Mamouche and Hugo Ekitike. When they were playing, it was week in, week out, oh, this person's really good. And the same thing's happening again. Another player who's looking quite promising is Ilyas Ansar, who did also score again as well. Again, like if you look on the channel, there are videos on Özun and Ansar. And Said El-Mala as well. So you should go watch them. Sunday, it was a bit of the El Sacico. It was Bayer Leverkusen versus Gladbach. Both teams are the only teams to sack their managers. Leverkusen were obviously in their third game under Kasper Heumand, while Gladbach were in their first game under Eugen Polanski. And so the main thing here is we'll look at Gladbach, as they produced a night and day performance compared to what happened under the Gerard de Seoane. There was energy, there was intensity, they were creating chances, like meaningful chances, and the players were stepping up as well. Kevin Sturger looked a completely different player, and he looked more like he was Bock himself. Jens Kastrup provided energy. Yannick Engelhardt looked interesting and looked like a midfielder Gladbach were missing. Joe Scally was good in attack and in defence. Like, it was a completely different team compared to what happened or what was happening under Seoane. I mean, even Florian Neuhaus made a return and had a bit of an impact as well. So that means in the whole Seoane and Neuhaus thing, Neuhaus was the winner. And so what this led to was, granted, the performance was a lot better for Gladbach, but it did look like they were losing this game when Malik Tillman scored. However, Gladbach kind of later Leverkusen and scored late on from a Haris Tabakovic header. So to score their first goal in 5 games, nearly 6, granted they're still unbeaten, or they still would have to win in 11 games, but I think the performance against Leverkusen showed that against Frankfurt and Freiburg, who they played before the October international break, their first win is coming soon. And I'm sure of that. Gladbach, it's the steps in the right direction for Gladbach. For me, it was the first time I watched them and didn't regret watching the past 90 minutes and didn't feel like I wasted my life. It was fun. It restored the feeling. And it felt like Gladbach were going in the right direction. Whether this was just new manager bounce, obviously is yet to be seen. But if this becomes a theme, then 1, Polanski may need to stay in charge, and 2, then Gladbach are going to become an interesting team again. And then for Gladbach, I think what will then be the next step is hiring a sporting director, like a good one. And then things will be going in the right direction. For Leverkusen, as I said, they're still getting used to everyone, the new head coach, the new players, but at the moment they are looking like a bit of a one-man team. And that one man is Alejandro Grimaldo. Last year it was Florian Wirtz, now it's Grimaldo. Obviously they need time to adapt and click with Heumand's style of play, what helps. Or there's no midweek game for Heumand, so he can have more time on the training pitch. But the October international break will be crucial. Because what Leverkusen's problem is now is that then they have enough creative players. Malik Tillman, Ibrahim Maza, Elias Ben-Seguir, Claudio Echeverri. They have enough creative players, but right now they're not doing enough to create for Patrick Schick, who looked a bit of a pedestrian yesterday. So once they have the click, then Leverkusen will do well. At the moment, though, they're all still kind of, it's the adaptation period. Finally, Dortmund played Wolfsburg to round out the weekend. It was kind of an uneventful win for Dortmund, which is what they kind of need. You don't want chaos where you're 2-0 up, you throw away a 2-0 lead, you're 3-2 down and you win 4-3, So they got the job done. Granted, Wolfsburg didn't really cause them any true problems. The positive for Dortmund was Nico Schlotterbeck returned from his injury. His meniscus injury was kept him out for the past 5 months, so he's back, especially in a time where they need centre-backs. And actually, it's a cliche, but it's the type of win you needed if you want to win anything. In Dortmund of old, they, as I said, they throw this away or make it wildly uneventful for no reason. But this time they got the job done, which is obviously characteristic to Niko Kovac. And as things stand, Dortmund are obviously the only challenging team that are within touching distance of Bayern Munich. And so you have to hope that Dortmund can maintain this form. So the table sees Bayern Munich top 100% record, 12 points. Borussia Dortmund are second on 10 points. RB Leipzig are now moved up to third on 9 points. And Cologne are fourth with 7. The relegation zone sees Heidenheim last without a win, losing all 4 games. Gladbach are on 2 points. Augsburg are in the relegation playoff with 3 points. Leverkusen are 11th in mid-table, and Stuttgart are 8th with 6 points, while Frankfurt are 6th on 6 points as well. The games next week see Bayern Munich play Werder Bremen on Friday, which, as things stand and how vulnerable Bremen look, especially in defence, looks like it'd be a rout for Bayern. On Saturday, Mainz play Borussia Dortmund, Bayer Leverkusen play St. Pauli, RB Leipzig play Wolfsburg, and then Borussia Mönchengladbach play Frankfurt in the Topspiel. Then on Sunday you have Cologne versus Stuttgart, which is the standard game. So let me know what you think, which teams impressed you, which players impressed you. If we forget Bayern, is the Bundesliga fun? Let me know what you think in the comments.